Hello, BookTube. Well, as you can see, I have a guest with me once again. This is Jared.
Hello, BookTube. Hello,
Hello to
Steve.
all my imaginary BookTube friends. He has a struggling little BookTube channel of his own, but he's got the right hat on today because he's a thoroughgoing book person. And in the life of every thoroughgoing book person, there is a nightmare, and it's the same nightmare. We're all incredibly individual in every other way, but there's one nightmare that lurks in our lives, and it's not silverfish. And believe it or not, it's not house fires either, despite the fact that you hear 100 sirens of video on my channel. No, it's moving. It's moving all these books. That is the nightmare that faces us all. And you are going through that.
I am. We're in like the very early stages of trying to set up our home so that we can sell it, so it can look nice in pictures and all of this stuff, so we can move into a bigger place. And the number one challenge that I'm faced with is this enormous book collection.
The very
and
thing that gives you so much pleasure when you don't have to
yes,
box it up and move it is the number one problem. So are you going through this? Everybody has gone through this. They all think the same thing. How much easier would this be if I didn't have any books?
yes. So at first I just started buying storage tubs and packing them. That was my first thought. I was like, I'll keep them all. We're moving to a bigger place. And then I kept noticing I kept aiming too low, and I'd have to go back to Home Depot and buy storage tubs. And when I realized, this is an 850 square foot apartment. I should also mention that I have probably 1,000 books in storage at my mom's house that she's told me once I move into a real house, I have to take, or else she's going to burn them or something. But I realized like I just had so many books, and even just stacking them up and waiting for my friend who has a truck to come help me put them in temporary storage or something was going to be a day-long affair.
Yeah.
It was going to, and as you can see, I'm not as young or spry as you. And it starts hurting your back when you start lifting all of those tubs. I mean, there's like pain involved. And so eventually I just kind of came to terms with the fact that I probably just have to get rid of a lot of books. And that's what I've been doing this week is purging a lot of books.
But most people reach that point and then don't. Most people, they get to that point, their back is aching, the van is completely full. The last time I did it was eons ago. Mm-hmm. We rented a big van, a van that's big enough to move a household, and it filled with books alone. We had to make two trips, one for books and literally one for everything else.
Yeah.
But most people, when they get to that point, say, yeah, this is it. I'm done. And then they do it anyway. Yeah. Are you actually going to get rid of books?
I got rid of a huge percentage of my books 2 days ago. They are gone. They're gone. I had, let's say in this house, I had about 12 storage tubs full of books. And these are big, like 27-gallon storage tubs. I got rid of 6 of them.
Now, I'm assuming you didn't do that blind.
No. It took me 3 days to sort through them, because what would happen is I had put them all in tubs, and then I would go through the tubs and pick the ones I knew I definitely wanted to get rid of. And then I'd take a little break and I'd go through all the tubs again. And I went through it. And here's something I discovered, Steve. This was really interesting. 2 of the tubs, which were from the shelves I used to have in our living room, which was near where I recorded, but it's also where I would read the most. Those tubs, like from the books with from those shelves, I got rid of maybe 3 books from those 2 giant storage tubs. I had put all of my favorite books together. It turns out, and then I had all of these other books elsewhere, and so some tubs I almost got rid of like an entire one, and it was more a matter of picking out the ones there. And so what I had found was, kind of without thinking, I had already sorted my books into things I definitely wanted to keep, things I definitely could get rid of. And then there's this vast middle ground. there is the unenlightened center.
And that vast middle ground is ultimately indefensible, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is it ultimately indefensible to have thousands of books that you feel, nah?
Exactly. And I realized I realized like a couple of things here. One, where there were the shameful books that I hadn't read and I probably wasn't going to read. Now, you don't know what that feeling is like because there isn't a book in the world you haven't read. But but for someone who only reads, say, 50 to
I don't
75
know.
books a
There's new
year.
tentacle books being written every day.
Oh
One
no.
can
Oh
hardly
no.
keep up. Why
Yeah.
you need
I mean,
millions of hands.
yeah. I by like booktube standards, I'm actually probably a slower reader in the sense that I only read maybe 1 to 2 books a week. You read 120 books in a month, and so you're reading more in a month than I read in a year. Now I'm very happy with my pace and things like this, but the point is I have to be honest with myself. There are certain books that I've read and that I know I'm not going to reread, or it will be years before I do, and in which case just the storage costs, so to speak, of keeping it in the room is not worth it. There are the books that I bought that I thought I would read that I just decided I'm not going to, or I'm not going to finish. There are also the books that I just actively hate, but for some reason were kept around. Those were the easiest ones. And then there was this fourth category, Steve, of books that I had in physical and digital form, and I had to tell myself that it was okay to only have a digital copy.
Yes, we'll be getting to that.
Because and when I really started being honest with myself, I honestly I could probably go through the remaining tubs that I have because I have about half of my books left. I bet you, like I was kind of running this experiment in my head, or just that's the most bro way of putting it. I was thinking, I was thinking, what would happen if I told myself I could only take 100 books to the new house? And here's the truth. It would be a library that most scholars in history would still kill for.
Oh
Like,
yes.
and we're totally ignoring my digital collection, which is huge, right? Because I don't just have it on Kindle and stuff. I have a bunch of stuff, like patristic literature. If I want to read like those kind of writers, I have all that stuff on a separate program with like this all indexed and stuff. So why do I have a physical copy anymore? All of these questions. And I realized I have more books than most people in their lives in history, I mean, by a huge margin, would ever read, including some of the most brilliant minds. And I bet if I limited myself to 100 books, I would still be happy. And while
live in
I,
those books,
well,
to live in those books,
yeah,
absolutely. The amazing thing, the thing that would stop most readers in their tracks is that right now they have more books than Aristotle ever saw in his life. Not all the books he owned, but all the ones he ever even saw. They have more books than he ever even saw.
Exactly.
It's a question of what you do with them. I mean,
exactly. So, like, am I going to get rid of my copies of like the Iliad or the Odyssey? No, because I plan on returning to those books quite a bit. There's a book I swear by. I don't know. Actually, we've never talked about this. If you like Bullfinch's mythology, I think it's like a book. I think it's a book everyone should have on their shelf. Like, I think
absolutely love Bullfinch's mythology.
Yeah.
And I also loved Bullfinch. One madcap summer on the Massachusetts shore.
So, but there are some books that
what ended it is that everything was going fine, and then he rolled over, looked at me, and said, I think I should add a little Byron to this. You're out because that's all he does in Bullfinch's mythology. He's in the middle of telling you the story of Orpheus and Eurydice, and then he adds some Byron.
Yeah.
But it's wonderful in that way. I agree completely.
It's one of those. It's a book actually I love to keep by like in my reading spot, just as it's a great perusing book. Excellent. Yes. I mean, I love it. So there are some books I'm never going to get rid of. And they were the ones that probably I would be happy to read until I die. I would just keep reading them, even though I love variety and all of this stuff. There are some books here, and it just made me realize, in a way, actually keeping all of the books started to make me feel very selfish, and it both and a little delusional. Like I wasn't going to read them all. Really, I was doing it because I like how they look. And I could go sell them. What I did was I just took mine to half price books. I called ahead so they could get some dollies ready for me. A couple people met me at my car. Did I make a lot of money when I sold them to half price books? No, you make pennies on the dollar or something, but other people will now read them. In fact, when I was selling them, someone was like, oh, there's a theology student who works here who we've already called and told he can look through one of your tubs because I had given up so much stuff that I had digital copies of. And I was like, great. Now there is a grad student who's broke who now gets to buy cheap copies of books and read them and love them and then maybe pass them on or keep them,
Yeah, once you let them back out into the wild, they're free to help other people. Whereas if they're just sitting there inert on your own shelves, they're not.
No.
Not free to help anybody.
And here's the bigger secret. If I decide that I shouldn't have gotten rid of maybe one of those books, I can probably buy it.
Well, it's the minimalist dude bro rule, the 20 rule, right? If you can get it in 20, if you haven't used it in 20 weeks and you can get it in 20 minutes for $20, then you shouldn't have it. And you shouldn't have it until you want it.
I had never heard that exact formulation of that rule, but I guess there's something very similar going on in my mind here. But maybe one day I really decide I want to read whatever the book was that I gave up. I mean, it's hard to even remember some of these.
It's usually PURGE.
Yeah. Or like
Das Kapital. Das Kapital is the other one that sits on people's shelves. And always meaning to get to it, and they never do.
That book? Who's the author? It's A History of Reading.
Alberto Manguel?
Yeah. I read that. I love that book. I have a digital copy actually, so I didn't need a physical one. But if for some reason I just needed a physical copy, I could just buy one. Like
and it's 1,000 print run in English. So it's out there. Absolutely, there are.
And so
do you think that what you did unconsciously is something that lots of readers do unconsciously, where they have been sort of pre-sorting their books?
I think if you're the type of reader who returns to books, right, or if you're the type of reader who doesn't just pile them up on the floor and then forget about them, if you're at least a little conscious about that stuff, I think a lot of people are already doing this. They're already sorting their books. Yeah.
I do it explicitly. This room.
Yeah.
This room is different from all the other rooms. The books in this room are different from all the other rooms. They aren't organized in any way. And they do meet that threshold, whereas the others, much as I love them, they don't.
Yeah.
But I see some people's collections that are just out of control. Just out of control, where you've got whole shelves of things that you are simply, you have them on the shelf as a demonstration that you once liked them, or that you like the idea of them. But you are not going to read them. You absolutely are not going to read them, much less reread them. I see a lot of that. and
I even had a thought, like, having a huge book collection makes me look better on camera if I'm making book videos, right? People like to see it. And then I realized that's BS. Like, okay, I won't be putting a false image of myself on camera anymore then, right? Like, that's the answer. I should be, I mean, because part of me thought about it. Like, people like to see giant book collections when you're talking about books. And
I had a Zoom chat once with a group of people, and they were so accustomed to fake backgrounds that they all started joking about my fake background. And then one of them said, "No, wait, that's full of all sorts of individual crap. You're not telling me you own all those books." I said, "I'm afraid so. Yes, I don't know how to do a background, or it would be a beach. It wouldn't be a lot."
Yeah.
But one of the thoughts that crossed your mind when you were looking at all these books on shelves and in tubs was your e-reader. You have an e-reader.
I do.
Care to give it a shot? Is it a Kindle?
Yeah, I have a Kindle. I have actually a couple of Kindles floating around our house. I will soon have significantly fewer because I still have to go to the post office, and that's my job today, which is to send you a box of tech. That's happening. But I have one that really just is. I have a Kindle Paperwhite. I remember I had upgraded to that one because it's the one with the USB-C charger rather than the micro USB, which mattered a lot to me. Just mattered because it's a matter of keeping cables organized. But
That's amazing. The siren song of the USB-C is amazing. You suddenly want all your tech to be that, so you can just have one cord.
Exactly. I have always kind of said that I preferred physical books, and in some limited cases I probably still do. But I realized that for a lot of my pleasure reading, like especially just reading I just like want to do because the book seems interesting or something like this, the Kindle really just fits my needs so well, especially now that we have a 2-month-old. No, he's almost 2.5 months old, because I'm often just falling asleep while reading, and I can just do that with a Kindle without turning the lights on. And it's just made, or I can hold my Kindle and the baby's like on my chest and I'm on the couch and I can just, while he naps or something, and I can just hold the Kindle. I added a little strap to my Kindle that you can just like glue on basically and slide your hand in. It's a little easier on the thumb. I just do that. And it's been great. It actually just fits my needs. And I don't love Amazon. In fact, I have a lot of problems with Amazon's business practices. I don't like their use of DRM. I don't like the fact that technically we do not own those Kindle books. Like this is something I'm very concerned. I'm actually very concerned about the possibility of sort of ghost or like shadow editing of books when they've been deemed sufficiently offensive by publishers.
Yeah.
You know, if I had Roald Dahl and it was connected to the Kindle library, do they get to like delete the words and like ruin the prose or something?
Yeah.
Like, you know, we
Roald Dahl and PG Wodehouse. And the thing is, it's not making the headlines anymore, but it's still happening.
yeah, you know, these sort of silent edits that people justify as editorial changes or something like this, or modernization. Whenever I've talked about this, people have just said, "Oh, this kind of stuff happens all the time. It's totally fine." And it's not one. It's genuinely terrible writing when you look at the changes they make. The people who make these kind of petty changes don't know what they're doing when they're writing. And I worry if I don't own a physical local copy of the thing, then I just kind of assume that I don't truly own it, right? So like that's one problem with the Kindle. I know there are other options with e-readers, but just talking about in general, I now actually have kind of been converted to like, I like e-readers. They're very useful. They're very useful. To deny it, I kind of think is to fall into a bit of kind of you're just romanticizing a slightly older way of doing things, right?
Yeah. Yes, like all the dude bros who write on manual typewriters.
Something I've never done. Well, I think I had like a typewriter as a kid because it was like my aunt's typewriter and I would just like take it apart and stuff. But I've never owned a typewriter. I'm proud to say.
I had a back and forth with one of them because I left a comment on one of his videos. And he wrote to me and said, bless his little heart, well, you know, dude, until you've experienced what it's like, you really can't say how great it feels.
I think you have experience.
I have enormous amounts of experience. I lived on my manual typewriter. I remember exactly what it was like. It's such a, as BookTube would say, such a bougie affectation. Use this completely inferior piece of technology because you know you have the backup of Gmail.
Yeah.
It's the fate, isn't it? It's the fate of all of us to take advantage of the technological wonders around us while not liking the purveyors.
Yeah.
We don't like Google. We don't like Amazon. We obviously we don't like Twitter.
Yeah.
We take advantage of these things even though they're all around us.
I feel like I'm in a deeply troubled relationship with Apple, where unfortunately I think most other computer products are borderline unusable. Like and yet I hate their business. I hate the way they lock you in.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I go through this all the time. I will pick up an Android tablet and I will say, all right, well, I want to do X, Y, or Z, so I better get ready for the Battle of the Somme. And instead, the Android tablet is saying, oh, you want to do that? Okay, fine. Here are some other suggestions to make it even easier. Is there anything else I can do for you? And I'm thinking, oh my God, it's the promised land. And then I try to ask it to do something productive.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Mommy never prepared me for this. So all of a sudden, you have to go back to Apple devices.
I at one point I switched to a Pixel phone because I wanted to get away from Apple stuff. And I love some of the features that it had. It had this great like call screener and stuff. And then one day I was calling into my insurance company and the touch dials, like I would press 1, to go to this next, like the menu didn't work. Like literally press. And when I called on my wife's iPhone, it worked. It was like, oh, okay, I'm just screwed.
It's the ultimate backstop that Apple has. They don't ever use it. They say all sorts of things about pathway to the future and building a community and whatnot, but their ultimate backstop is that their tech works.
Yeah.
All the time. It works all the time. But I want to know, since we're talking, this is a low-key trauma that we're talking about. That must be why you're swilling gin. This is a low-key trauma. This moment comes to everybody, I think, eventually. That moving tub moment where you look down at these things that brought you only a kind of warm pleasure when they were on the shelf. You look down and say, not only do I not want these things, but I'm getting rid of them.
Yeah.
I'm curious. That makes me want to know about little Jared. Do you remember the first books you owned?
Oh, the first books I owned. I don't remember
the first time you ever had an inkling to build a library, even if it was just a book.
Yeah, I remember sorting through things on my bookcase. I had this very lovely bookcase as a kid that my uncle had made for me. And I remember a few books that really got stuck on there. Now, as a like a really young reader, probably the books were just like whatever my parents had bought for me. And so I was just kind of getting stuffed there. But I remember like guarding kind of jealously when Harry Potter came out as a kid, and I got onto it a little bit late. I was about 11 when I started reading Harry Potter, but that was like by the time the third or fourth book was coming out. And so my mom got me the paperbacks of the ones out, and she told me she would never buy me a hardback because they were so expensive. And that lasted about 10 days because the fear, the just like the furor over Harry Potter was so tremendous. I mean, it's hard to actually kind of explain to people the cultural like push towards that series that existed, that really hasn't been
nothing
matched.
like it since.
And I remember having it on my shelf. I remember lending one of the books to a student of my mom's who was about my same age because she was a teacher, and it came back completely ripped up. It was my Prisoner of Azkaban copy, and I remember just being outraged, right? Not because they had done this to me, but it was like they did this to this book.
I think it was Harry Potter that did this for a lot of people.
Yeah.
That suddenly they understood what reading was, but also suddenly they understood what a library was, what personal possession of books was, because they had to go to the store. There was a huge ritual that was made out of going to the store, waiting in line, getting your copy. Suddenly, tens of thousands of young readers realized the difference between a paperback and a hardcover, realized the difference between editions of a hardcover. I firmly believe, even when I disliked the phenomenon, I firmly believe that it made 10,000 readers.
Yeah. The or it was that was the series that taught me that they changed the titles for different markets, which you just wouldn't know as a kid, right? You would just assume books all have the same title. And then you learned that it was the Philosopher's Stone. Right?
Yes, and that was the beginning of the end for you, wasn't it?
So that sounds pretty good. That sounds pretty good.
No.
Yeah.
Harry has much to answer for. What about, did you go away to college?
I went away to college. I
Did you
took
pack books?
I took a few books, but not many. And I think the thought was that then I knew I was majoring in philosophy from the moment I went to college. I went in as a philosophy major, which is very rare, actually. Most philosophy majors transfer in about their second year.
Not rare enough.
And I probably took like 10 philosophy books or something, but I had like a little single room in, a dorm, and it was just horrendous. But I quickly would buy books. I would go to like used bookstores. There was this Episcopal church near my philosophy department's building that had this fantastic used book sale like every other month. Church shops just are the place to get great old books.
They are. They really are.
And usually they're being attended by someone who doesn't actually care about making that much money. They just do it to slightly increase money here. And it's a way for the parishioners mostly to get rid of their books. Yeah. So if they see some broke college kid carrying a box to the shop and then filling it, they'll say, give us $5 for the lot, or something like that. That was the trick you learned early on.
It's amazing the dearth of them in Boston area now. There used to be a bunch of church basement book sales that there aren't many of them anymore. I don't know why. Maybe I do know why. Maybe it's those horrible creatures with their scanners.
Oh yeah,
maybe that did it in.
Like I don't know of any that happen regularly in Austin. There might be some, but I just don't know of them. And Austin is just not walkable enough that it would be very hard for you to just be like exploring downtown and then like stumble on one, right? When I lived in Boston and I would walk everywhere or like take the T somewhere, when I first moved to Boston, I would like take the T to a neighborhood I'd never been to if I had like a day, and then just kind of get lost knowing that if I found the T again, I could get home. That was basically like kind of just fun. You can't really do that in Austin because there's like terrible public transportation and you'll boil in the sun and it's December and it's 100 degrees or something.
Can't do it in the New York subway system either because you'll die.
Yeah.
you'll go to one of the many places where you will simply be killed for sport. You can still do it in Boston. It's true. Yeah. But to get back to the subject, because Zoom tells me we're running out of time.
Yeah.
Always the warning that we're running out of time comes with you after what feels like 3 seconds. But we'll do this again, but I want to get back to the stuff. So what kind of a moment is this with the Kindle? Let's take Jared into the future. Into the future, you're all set up in the new home. What's the shape, given the Kindle, what's the shape of what happens with books in that new home?
Yeah. I think that the answer to that is just like the books that we keep. Well, there's going to be 2 categories of books, I think, in the home, because I'm still going to buy some physical books. especially when you're reading to a kid, I think having
Oh, yes.
being able to turn the page and stuff like this. I've tried kids books on like an iPad or something, and it just doesn't work.
No, it doesn't work
very well.
No, it doesn't
So we're
work.
gonna have those books, but you might have this one portion of our collection, which is just the stuff in rotation. We buy it, we pass it along to other people very quickly. And I actually think I've never really thought of my books like that, but I think that's just going to be part of our books from now on. It's just a certain amount of books that are in rotation. They come in, they're read, they're enjoyed, they're passed on. Whether we dump them at a little free library, we sell them at half price books for a couple of cents, give them to a friend, something, right? And then we're just going to have this core of a collection, which is probably not going to be, and this still sounds like a lot, right? But it's probably not going to be more than like 200 or 300 books, which is still huge if you think about it. But compared to like what we've been talking about, small, or it's a fraction of it, that are just kind of there because they are the books that I'd like to return to quite a bit. Even then, I'm probably deluding myself if I think it's 300. You know, I think you talked about in a video traveling by sea essentially, and carrying like 20 books with you. And one, nowadays you could just take your Kindle, which would be amazing as long as you had a way to charge it. But two, 20 books is probably like the uppermost that you could do.
Yeah, I had 17
yeah,
books,
yeah,
but I couldn't have brought a Kindle.
yeah.
Because I was often months away from any kind of source of power.
That's one of the big problems, right? Yeah.
Yes,
but anyway, the
Kindles
point
don't automatically charge.
Yeah,
could,
yeah.
But they don't. There are
Yes.
6 different ways where they could automatically charge, but then you're never going to buy another one. And Amazon wants you to buy another one. So
yeah. So those are my so like some amount of books that are kind of there permanently that I think are worth keeping. But like, I think just increasing, I'd like to just be more and more selective about what those books are.
You could make a very tasteful room with 2 or 3. You could make a very tasteful little room.
And the way that we're looking for our new home is to have a dedicated, since I work from home for my day job, plus I make videos and stuff, to have like one room that's sort of my dedicated studio / office room, and probably just put a couple of nice shelves up in the right places. And like, we've just decorated the room basically with those books, you know?
Do you buy ebooks? Many? You said you're worried about the fact that you don't own them.
I unfortunately I bought a fair number of ebooks. And I know there are ways to strip the DRM from them. So it's probably something I'd like to do eventually, but I just have over the years. I mean, the first time I got a Kindle was when I went to college. Actually, my dad got me one.
Oh, no kidding.
And so I've had one on and off, and I didn't use it for a long time. But then, for instance, when I would travel in Asia with my wife to like go see her family, you don't take physical books if you're traveling in Asia. You take a Kindle and you take a wall adapter that will work on the plugs, right? It works so much easier.
I didn't have a Kindle when I traveled in Asia.
Well, if you were going today,
when I traveled in Asia, computers did not exist when I traveled in Asia. The internet did not exist.
Well, I'd say if you're traveling today, take a Kindle. It would basically be my advice. And so I've used them on and off, and I've got a pretty big ebook collection. I've got an even bigger one lately because I was able to get some free ebooks and stuff. But I just need to figure out something. I know you can also buy ebooks not from Amazon, from other places that don't have DRM, and then you can like load them on, and that would work too. I want to basically explore non-Amazon options as much as possible. But unfortunately, Amazon.
You see, e-reading is a bigger.
I think it's going to be a bigger part
of your reading life from here on out.
I think so. Yeah, I think I've just had to accept it, and maybe part of me feels a little bit of sadness about it, and yet part of me knows that it's just the right choice, right?
Well, like you mentioned it half an hour ago. There's a kind of romanticism in having a great big library of books, on shelf after shelf after shelf, going all the way up to the ceiling. There's a kind of, I mean, it's an aesthetic appeal, but there's another appeal too. There's a deeper appeal, some kind of appeal other than that.
So I think that a lot of people like to use their books as a way of demonstrating who they are, both to themselves and to other people.
Do tell.
And I am certainly one of those people.
Talk about walking right into it. I was being nice.
And I think that it probably contributes.
If you're going to talk about Ryan Holiday, at least name him.
I would say that at least in my case, I think that these books, having them there to kind of serves the ego, right? And I think basically it just, which I've been told by someone is the enemy. But I think it basically it's a vanity project for me. I think I've realized that possibly just having all those books was a vanity project to like look cool, or like in a way that I defined, or something like this. what really matters to me is actually, am I the type of person who has read them, enjoyed them, and learned from these books? Like that's the stuff that matters the most, right? You probably think that's still BS, and I should just say, was it fun? Did it bring or
That's
something?
the great kryptonite of e-readers of all kinds, is that there is no display of them at all.
Yeah,
No one can
yeah,
even
yeah,
tell
yeah.
what you're reading while you're reading it. They much less.
It was a
after.
great thing for the romance industry, right? Or for like those embarrassing reads. And you know what, Steve? Oh man, I can't believe I'm going to admit this. When I wanted to read trashy fantasy novels, I used my e-reader because I didn't want those on my shelf. Like that was always my thought, right? Have the serious philosophy books on my shelf, and then have like the
I've heard
fantasy
about
stuff.
this from all sorts of for instance, romance readers. There are a huge number of over decades, a huge number of the ladies who read romances like them. The spicier, the better.
Yeah, yeah, and those covers.
Yeah, those covers.
Yeah,
They're the ones that's why those little cloth book covers for mass market paperbacks were even invented in the first place.
yeah.
I've heard
So
about
I think
lots of people. I've never felt it myself. Never.
I think very recently I've decided two things. One is that I'm going to stop. One is to just say, who cares if people like make fun of you for something or something like that, which is a realization I should have had a long time ago. But who cares if someone sees you reading, that fantasy book that's not a philosophy book or something like that? Like, just like genuinely, who cares? Like, and then the second part of this is just that I want to be honest with people at all times. Like, you have to put up some barriers when you get bigger on YouTube, or else people will just take up too much of your emotional time. Like they'll reach out with very, very personal questions that you just can't be equipped to answer, and things. You have to put up some barriers. So they'll send you an email saying, "What happens if I purge all of my books?"
I have never figured out a way to domesticate my own imaginary booktube
well,
friends.
I have to do this to a certain degree, but I do feel like I owe it to people who watch me that I'm presenting an accurate reflection of myself, because that's why they're watching, right? And so anytime I let like vanity get in the way, I'm actually being dishonest with both myself and with those people.
Well, we should wrap this up before we get cut off in mid-sentence. But I want another round of conversation on this subject.
Absolutely. We'll do it soon.
We'll have to say goodbye before this cuts me off in mid-sentence, but this has been wonderful. You have experienced the great purge.
I feel light. I feel
the beginnings of it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure all the bearded authors survived. But maybe not the next round.
I kept a lot of women